Welcome back to Motorcycle Ride and my Touring Sportster build. And in this video, I'm probably going to do the biggest difference in improving comfort of this bike for long distance touring. We're going to change the ergonomics of the handlebars. Now, if you watch the beginning of the series, you understand that I like these handlebars. This is like the third iterations of this setup right now. It is perfect for my short hops around town stuff. It's just getting out on the highway and sitting in the same position for a long time. I have just a little bit of forward lean, which again, I prefer that way of riding around town, but that puts a slight amount of weight on my wrist, and that might be contributing to a little numbness I have on my hands. In the earlier episodes of this series, I tore the engine motor mounts out and replaced them to help that, but I have a feeling that little weight issue will make a bigger difference if I can alleviate that one. So I just want to lift the bars a little bit, not a much, and maybe bring them back. They'll bring my posture a little bit more upright and reduce the amount of weight I have on my wrists so that the vibration doesn't affect them as much. But, you know, my goal is I'd like to someday have a heavyweight tour to do what I'm trying to accomplish here and keep this for the around town stuff. So I don't want to do a wild modifications that I can't reverse easily. Maybe something I could reverse after I go on a tour and I come back and I just want to putz around town in about 20, 30 minutes. So instead of doing new handlebars, buckhorn styles, risers raised up a little bit more, I'm going to try and do a 4-inch riser kit. The other advantage of that one is I can stick with all my stock length cables, I hope. So that's what we're doing today, putting on a set of risers. For those of y'all that don't know, risers are just a fancy name for your handlebar mounts. Now, technically, the stock Sportster came with, what is that, 1-inch or 2-inch risers from the factory. All I'm doing is replacing this part, and that's what they call the riser, which you'll notice will come up a little bit farther. It'll also come back a little bit. And all it is just holding the handle. So all we're doing is replacing that right there. We just need to make sure that we don't mess up any of the other cables along the way. Now, as I said earlier, I like this setup right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark a line on this top clamp, which we're reusing, and a line on the handlebar. That way, whenever I reassemble it, I can get everything lined up. I'm also just going to put a line lengthwise, and I'm going to make a note of how much space there is between the edge of that and that bar. That way I can position it correctly this way. I'm also going to do the same exact thing to the other side, just so that there's no error in case one gets wiped off. It's that important to me. Sharpie will come off with a little bit of alcohol or solvent. Okay, to loosen these up, I got a little 1/4-inch hex head, and just, you know, counterclockwise, take it slow. And I would do a little bit of add time on each one to start. Note that your instruments is held on to the top, so the instruments are moving with the handlebars, so you want to make sure those cables don't get stretched too. I'm also doing this now because I have the tank off and no risk damaging the tank if it's not even on the bike. The bottom ones don't have washers. The top ones do have washers above the instrument. Always nice things to remember. They are also not the same length. The top ones are longer than the bottoms. Next, there's a 3/4-inch bolt down here that we just need to loosen up, and then we can twist off the top one. Now, if I was smart, I probably would have loosened these all the way up before taking off the handlebars, because the handlebars are what's allowing me to hold it. And it looks like they did use red Loctite on these, so we'll use that when we put it back together. Remind me of that. So I learned my lesson, and I'm going to do this installation backwards, meaning that I'm going to put the motor mounts on on the handlebars before the bike. So get the bottoms in first. That way I can get the stretchers into place. Okay, I screwed up the footage of tightening the bolts, but that's no big deal. But I did run into a problem halfway through. See, the ones I took off, you notice that the screws go all the way through. You see that? Well, these, they don't, which meant that I had to go buy new screws. Basically, I swapped the shorter, smaller ones up top, and I went and bought ones down below. So they are ½ inch shorter on all four ends. I'm not sure if that's good or bad, but after I got it on, I installed the seat, and I threw my leg over it, and I found good, somewhat bad, and fatal. The sitting position, my back is straight up right now, and I could actually see with a sleeping bag behind me that I would have a nice backrest and stuff like that. But I also know that in normal riding, I will have to have my arms bent, so it's not that comfortable. The other thing is, whenever this has a rise and a kickback, I think that's what they call it. Well, the instruments now went from this angle to this angle, so I'm actually kind of looking down at them. It works, I just don't quite like it. But the fatal flaw from these, and why I've already ordered another set, and I'll show you that in a second, the throttle cables are fully okay going from lock to lock. Same with the clutch cable, no problem whatsoever. But what I am very concerned about is the tension on my brake cable. It's got a hard bend right now, right there. I don't like that. So if I was to go back and forth between these two, I think that this would be a danger point. Now, granted, I do plan on putting steel braided brake lines on in the future, and I could just get a little bit longer cable right here, no big deal. But I don't have that right now. This was about $75. So for me, I've ordered basically a little bit taller riser on this part, but with no kickback, and that will solve this problem because it will bring it closer down. It will also solve my instrument problem because this angle, it'll be more flat, back to flat like I like it. So that's kind of why I wanted to bring this up to you to show you that this does fit, but there's one aspect to it that could lead to a future problem. So when you're doing this kind of stuff, even if you take it to a shop and get it back, go through and check everything. I mean, this is going to fit, this is going to work, but I'm worried that when I'm thousands of miles away from home, I might get a small leak there, and that could be a problem. So why risk it? So that's the fatal problem with this particular riser set. I am concerned about return policies, but that's a cheap problem to have to avoid a leak in the future. So, what are the new ones going to look like? Well, let's find out. Boom, there you go. Straight risers. These are a 3.5 inch. I'm thinking I could have probably gone 4.5 inch, but this is playing it safe. I do like the fact that the instruments are back at their original angle, so it looks proper to me. Fits behind the fairing well. And the height is pretty good. You can notice the brake line has a more natural curve to it now. It's not pulled taut, though this could probably be improved by simply loosening up. I think that's called a banjo bolt and moving it down, but then I would have to re-bleed the brakes and stuff like that. So I'll wait to do that whenever I replace my front brakes hoses. And when putting it up, you know, the last thing I did was I retorqued my all the bolts, made sure I had red Loctite on the bottom ones. I did put a tad bit of blue Loctite on the top ones. I will say that these new risers, they are aluminum, where the ones I took off were steel. I don't know if that will make any consideration with different kinds of metals because the screws themselves are stainless steel, but people have been doing this for a long time, so I'm going to trust history. If you notice, my back is somewhat upright. I do have a lot less weight on my handlebars, but it's probably it's a good compromise between the last versions and my original version. So maybe these are some I could just leave on all the time. I will say I was doing this very late at night, so it's too dark and out here to film, but I remember back in my motocross days how important it is to tighten the handlebar clamps so that the fronts are somewhat even on both sides, and then you retorque the bottoms to their torque specs and then go back to the tops. So it kind of clamps the whole thing down evenly. You don't want to twist like that because that will just cause it to loosen up over time. They don't require too much torque. I think it was like 12 foot-pounds, where the bottoms with the big ones were like 35, 40. Look that up for yourself to be sure, but other than that. But I think this will work out pretty nicely. The big goal was to reduce that lean forward, so I'm putting weight on my hands because, you know, making your hands heavier means that the vibration has a bigger impact. So reducing that weight was important for long distance comfort. This will probably work out pretty good, but we won't know until I've put a few 500-mile days on. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. Maybe picked up a few tips. Yeah, I know it was kind of basic, but that's what we're doing right here. Just basic stuff, following instructions, or even when they don't include instructions, following common sense. All the torque specs and anything like that, whenever I'm doing this kind of stuff, if it's not in the instruction manual, it's a Google search away. So it's readily available for any of us. My only thing is, you know, buy a torque wrench, and anytime you're installing something on a Harley, pretty much blue Loctite everything and torque it down to spec. Y'all be safe, have fun, and remember, go out for a motorcycle ride.